Oh no, not your side, Ross. You can go down. Perfect.
عمري 20 سنة، طالبة في جامعة القدس المفتوحة. كانت بدايتي في مركز الرواد في عام 2007.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle shown on over 25 cable stations from northern Vermont to southern Manhattan. On our website, thestruggle.org. Our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. Today we'll go from a methane compressor station in Connecticut to a children's cultural center in Aida camp on the West Bank. Along the way, we'll reflect on the Kingdom of Horrors, Saudi Arabia, and the Obama administration's refusal to try to convict the policeman who killed Michael Brown in Ferguson. We begin with two men chained to a mock bridge in a driveway of the Spectra energy project.
You want to send?
How are you feeling?
That's great. Yeah. That's good.
Good.
That's great.
That was pretty fast.
Make sure. Yeah, it's good. Not on yet. Yeah.
Can you give me any more room?
Oh no, not your side, Ross. You can go down. Perfect.
Yep, my name is Dan Fischer. I'm a member of Capitalism versus the Climate. We're a direct action group based here in Connecticut. Now, politicians say that fracked gas is a bridge fuel that will allow us to keep burning fossil fuels, but that claim ignores the reality that fracking causes enormous damage to forests, to communities, to the climate itself. And so we have built a bridge, and we're saying no, frack gas is not a bridge fuel, it's a bridge to nowhere.
Woo! See your son?
We are sitting on the driveway of the compressor station in Cromwell, trying to disrupt business as usual a little bit. This compressor station is already a source of a major source of hazardous air pollutants according to the federal government, and now Spectra Energy wants to expand it as part of the so-called Algonquin pipeline expansion. And so we're here to say no. If the authorities don't stop this deadly and dangerous pipeline expansion, then we will. We'll be back as many times as it takes.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, the town next door, Middletown, I lived there. I went to school there for 4 years, and I've known that fracking is deadly ever since 2010, when a gas plant exploded in Middletown and killed 6 workers.
You remember that? Yeah.
Yep, and then earlier this year, I went down to Pennsylvania and saw the impacts of fracking right at the sites of extraction. I went into the Tyodotin State Forest and saw trees being cut down in order to put the infrastructure in place. I spoke with people whose families have to move away and who can't drink the water near their homes anymore. And fracking and methane gas in general is just dirty energy. I mean, we have so many alternatives and we just don't need it. The interesting thing about this pipeline expansion is that it intersects with another dirty energy source, which is nuclear power. This pipeline's proposed route will go less than 1,500 feet from the Indian Point nuclear power plant in New York State.
That sounds insanely dangerous.
It does sound dangerous. The nuclear engine...
I'm getting up there in years, and I feel like I'm going to see the worst of it before I go. And I'm saying that's how urgent it is. But I also care for the generations coming after. And I just can't stand when people say, well, I won't be here. You know, but for me to think that like 1 or 2 generations after I'm gone, what's going to remain of humanity?
The emissions from the pollution from compressor stations like this contribute to kidney and liver damage, to lung damage, to brain impacts, even to leukemia. That's the long term. In the short term, it contributes to nausea, headaches, dizziness, eye irritation. These compressor stations are no good. And this one that they're trying to expand, it's just a quarter mile away from a middle school in Cromwell. And it's less than, I believe, 100 feet from recreational fields at a public park. So this is not...
And what's this facility here, this driveway and this facility behind us?
So it looks like Spectra Energy has some offices back there, but this big structure there, that's a gas compressor station, which a lot of folks don't know too much about, even the folks that support the pipeline. They're really just big, awful fossil fuel infrastructure pieces that pressurize the gas and push it along the pipeline route. And usually these things burn gas in order to generate the power to compress the gas. So they emit all sorts of awful toxins like hazardous air pollutants, fine particulates, formaldehyde. If you had an infrared camera right now, you would see billows of methane gas non-stop coming off it. They're really toxic, health impacts, a lot of respiratory illnesses, dizziness, headaches, long-term health impacts like, cancer and more serious diseases. So they're really awful things. And also sometimes they blow up, so they're very unsafe for communities.
It's happened before, yeah.
Totally.
What's that noise that I hear? It sounds like a train's been going by for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, so the compressor stations, when we talk to residents that live near these things, one of the biggest complaints is the noise. So the noise is 24/7, usually at night or early in the morning. They turn it up when they think people are sleeping, so they make it louder. And a few times a year, they do something called blow-offs, where I'm not sure exactly the technology behind it, but basically neighbors will say that it sounds like their house has an airplane flying over it for 20 or 30 minutes and the house will actually shake. So the noise is nonstop, and with the, they want to expand this compressor station so that it would make more noise and produce more toxin. So, this thing shouldn't be here in the first place, and we definitely don't want it to be expanded. We're chained up there, so you have something.
Now Jen Siskind from Food and Water Watch discusses fracking, the enormous waste of water, and chemicals that might be coming your way soon.
Every time we frack a well, we're injecting it with, on average, 5 million gallons of water that's been permanently contaminated with 50,000 gallons of chemicals. That water is permanently removed from our water cycle. It will never be potable again. Now, all of that water gets injected into the ground to break up shale to extract either oil or gas, and some of it comes back up to the surface. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of gallons of this chemically toxic waste that's coming to the surface that we're having to dispose of. And not only does it have all the original chemical constituencies that go into the fracking fluid, it's also extracting from the ground what's buried a mile deep that humans should never have any personal contact with whatsoever. We're talking about arsenic, lead, heavy metals, naturally occurring radioactive materials. And for the Marcellus Shale deposit, which is so close to us in Connecticut, it runs from mid-New York State down through Pennsylvania, West Virginia, a little bit of Maryland and Virginia. It is one of the most radioactive deposits of shale in the United States. So when we're sending all this fluid into these wells, what comes back up to the surface not only has the original chemical constituency, but it also is pulling with it all the heavy metals and the radioactive material, particularly radium, coming to the surface. Now, radium is a known carcinogen. It attracts itself to calcium in your body if it gets inside your body, so it's particularly known to cause bone, liver, and breast cancer, areas in your body where you have calcium. And all of this waste that we're producing out of Pennsylvania is being shipped mostly out of Pennsylvania into other states. It's being shipped into New York State, Ohio, West Virginia, New Jersey, and we've had some unconfirmed reports that we've been receiving it in Connecticut, but I don't know that that's accurate. I can't give a definitive answer on that. But we do know that last year, our state legislature tried to ban fracking waste from being brought into Connecticut. And we had a bill that had tremendous support in the Environment Committee. It passed through the Energy Committee. By the time it got to the floor, it started being compromised. And some of our legislative leaders who were actively supporting this bill also started compromising how much support they were going to put into it. The reason being, our governor, Governor Malloy, and our commissioner, Commissioner Klee from DEP, were not supporting passing this bill. In fact, Commissioner Klee was attending legislative hearings and actively providing testimony that he would like to regulate fracking waste being brought into Connecticut. The reason being is states are making money out of taxing and permitting all this waste. And we don't want to see Governor Malloy and Commissioner Klee regulate waste here in our state. Now, the bill did go through on a compromise basis. It had some very positive response in that we are now the first state in the nation that designates fracking waste as hazardous waste. And that determines how you can dispose of it, where it can go, and how it has to be transported and labeled as it's being transported. However, when the bill passed this past spring, the legislature specifically gave instructions to DEP that we will regulate fracking waste as early as 2017. 2 years from now, DEP needs to submit regulations. Now, thankfully, the language in the bill was salvaged in that it said when they submit their regulations in 2017, they could submit regulations that call for a ban on fracking waste. Or they could submit regulations in a manner in which Commissioner Klee and DEP find to be reasonable. And so far, we've been tracking some comments made by the Commissioner on radio and at forums such as this one. And Commissioner Klee has said, well, I've been talking with all these other regulators around the country, and I think we're going to look at how some of the states are doing the best job regulating that waste. And Colorado and California are two good examples. Well, I can tell you we have offices in both Colorado and California, and they are having terrific problems with contamination due to fracking waste.
If the wastewater comes into your state, it will likely come via a pipeline. Pipelines break all the time. Witness what's happening to the Yellowstone River in Montana, victim of a break in just a 12-inch diameter pipeline. The New York Times had a long obituary of the absolute ruler of Saudi Arabia, King Abdullah. They called him a modernizer, a reformer, a moderate. Give me a break. Not only did he terrorize over the people of Saudi Arabia and their guest workers with beheadings and whippings, he tried to export his vile system to as many countries as possible. Here's a more accurate picture of Saudi Arabia and Abdullah from Democracy Now!
While President Obama described Abdullah as a force of stability in the Middle East, analysts, many accused Abdullah of turning the uprising in Syria into a proxy war with Iran. In 2010, WikiLeaks published U.S. diplomatic cables which identified Saudi Arabia as the world's largest source of funds for Islamist militant groups. King Abdullah also sent tanks to help squash pro-democracy uprisings in neighboring Bahrain. Saudi Arabia recently came under criticism for its treatment of imprisoned blogger Raif Badawi, who was sentenced to 10 years in prison and 1,000 lashes to be carried out at a rate of 50 per week for charges including insulting Islam. He runs a political blog, or did until he was imprisoned. For more on the future on King Abdullah and the future of Saudi Arabia, we're joined via Democracy Now! Video stream by Toby Jones, Associate Professor of History and Director of Middle East Studies at Rutgers University. He's also the author of Desert Kingdom, How Oil and Water Forged Modern Saudi Arabia, previously the International Crisis Group's political analyst of the Persian Gulf. Toby Jones, welcome back to Democracy Now! Talk about the death of King Abdullah.
Abdullah's death, of course, marks a transition. It's getting a lot of attention. I think, as you pointed out in the lead up here, his record is not quite as positive or rosy as a lot of people are reflecting upon this morning. He came to power formally in 2005, celebrated as a potential reformer, as somebody who would modernize and lead the kingdom forward. But it turns out he's largely failed on every one of those measures. He's turned the clock back in terms of inciting sectarianism at home and supporting the forces of radicalism abroad. Or, if we want to read this in some slightly more benign way, he's at least not cracked down on the domestic forces at home that have sought to incite things like sectarianism. He burned bridges with Iraq. He saw the Arab Spring, the uprising in Syria, as an opportunity to challenge both Iran and Assad's power there, knowing full well what the possibilities of blowback and the rise of a kind of new regional terrorism might be. They've supported instability in Yemen. They've crushed pro-democracy forces in Bahrain. Look, Abdullah is somebody who was well-liked in the West. He might have been admired by a large section of Saudi society, but his record is one that's consistent with his predecessors. It's at odds with democracy, with human rights, and with all of the things that we're supposed to value.
And about that last point, Professor Jones, what is the state of human rights and democracy in the Saudi kingdom?
Well, it's as bad as it's ever been. You mentioned Badawi in the lead up here being sentenced to a long prison term, and of course now subject to flogging publicly, 1,000 lashes. This might seem outlandish, but this is sort of common practice in Saudi Arabia. Its prisons are full of political prisoners. They have been for quite a long time, including Islamists, suspected terrorists, as well as liberals and others who champion the cause of reform and human rights. There's been a steady string of arrests and detentions over the last few years. We pay attention now because of the crude kind of terrible nature of what's involved in public beheadings and this kind of medieval punishment of lashing people for speaking their minds. But this has been going on in Saudi Arabia for quite a long time. It's worth remembering that in 2002, 2003, Abdullah, when he was crown prince, although not formally the king, was nevertheless still in a position of political primacy, became a darling of the reform lobby and kind of the what we might call the moderate political wing of Saudi Arabia's domestic political society. He was seen as a reformer. He was embraced by a broad cross-section of folks who believed that Saudi Arabia, following 9/11, following the decade of the 1990s in which there was a kind of brutal politics and a crackdown on dissent, that he was going to be the person who spearheaded a period of liberal opening. And it turns out that he turned against all of his domestic allies. When he saw opportunities to crush and push back against those who might challenge Saudi political primacy, he did so, and he did so as crudely as any of his predecessors did. He was not a benevolent dictator. He was a dictator.
Missing from this report is the terrible effect Saudi Arabia had on Egypt. As Egypt's Al-Sisi dictatorship was cementing its hold on the population and massacring people in Rabaa Square, the Saudi Arabian regime was sending it billions. The New York Times reports that the Obama Justice Department is throwing in the towel on the Michael Brown killing in Ferguson. 19 eyewitnesses saw Brown with his hands up, but Attorney General Holder says nothing can be done. in case you missed it. In the State of the Union address, Obama said nothing about civil rights. Well, in defiance, we're going to repeat a short video about the die-in over Ferguson that was held a month ago or so at Yale University.
No more. We must say no more. We demand justice for Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, and all those who have been killed as a result of police brutality. We demand that officers who use excessive force be prosecuted. We demand that federal and state laws be changed to prevent racialized policing. I said, are you with me? Yes! Yes! So with that, I just want to go over the instructions for our die-in so that everyone is clear, and the code of conduct which we would like to prevail during this demonstration. And a lot of
Stop and go down. If you're in the line, come on. Everybody.
tell them! Black lives matter! Yes! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
أنا نانسي جعارة.
أنا اسمي أسيل إياد. أنا اسمي رفاه.
أنا ريان عمري 14 سنة ساكنة في خيمة عايدة. بديت أجي على مركز الرواد لما كان عمري 5 سنين.
أنا اسمي كنعان أبو سرور عمري 13 سنة. بلشت أجي على الرواد وعمري 6 سنين تقريبا. فحبيت أجي على الرواد عشان نشاطات وفعاليات وحلوين فكملت بالرواد ومن عمري 6 سنين.
عمري 20 سنة طالبة في جامعة القدس المفتوحة. كانت بدايتي في مركز الرواد في عام 2007. انتسبت للمركز عشان أطور مهاراتي وأكسب خبرة ومعرفة أكتر من اللي عندي وأطور حالي للمستقبل.
أنا جيت على مركز الرواد كان عمري 5 سنين، هلأ صار عمري 10 سنين، صار لي في مركز الرواد 5 سنين. أنا بحبه كتير، وأنا عشان أنا جيت على المركز الرواد أنا كتير في أشياء مش موجودة بالدار بالبيت، وأنا كتير بحبه وحبيت إني كمان هم علموني إني كيف أطبخ، وكمان إنه ودونا على الرحل.
بحب أجي على مركز الرواد لأنه أعطاني ثقة في حالي أكثر، وبطور في شخصيتي وبستفيد وباجي يعني بتعرف على ناس جداد.
بحب أجي على مركز الرواد لأنه بيعلمني بيعلمني إنجليزي وبستفيد من النشاطات اللي فيه. أنا شاركت بالمركز الرواد. حبيت إني كتير أرسم وكمان وأتعلم، وكمان إني أحب المسرح والتعليم، وأحب الموسيقى واللعب والقراءة.
المركز بيعني لي أشياء كتير، يعني من ضمنها برضه المسرح، لأنه المسرح بيخليني أعبر عن مشاعري وش اسمه، وكمان التصوير.
الذكرى اللي ترك لي إياها مركز الرواد كانت من خلال سفرتي مع مجموعة الرواد على فرنسا. في السفرة هاي قدمنا مسرحية اسمها كل الحكي على الذيب. ففي هاي المسرحية حاولنا قدر الإمكان إن إحنا نغير الصورة النمطية عن الشعب الفلسطيني اللي العالم بفكروا إن الشعب الفلسطيني هو شعب إرهابي.
أنا بحب لما أكبر أكون معلمة عشان الأطفال يكونوا متعلمين. كل الأشياء اللي موجودة في مركز الرواد بتساعدني أن أصير معلمة.
أنا حابب كتير لما أكبر إنه أدخل الجامعة وأدرس إدارة أعمال وأفتح مستقبلي من إدارة الأعمال.
بدي أصير معلمة إنجليزي عشان أعلم الأولاد الصغار اللي ما بيعرفوا إنجليزي.
الرواد بيعني لي أشياء كتير، فمثلا أنا بالمركز الرواد بشوف حالي كتير عن المسرح، بشوف حالي في الصور اللي بصورها.
بس أكبر حابة أدرس ميديا عشان أنقل الأخبار والصورة الصح عن شعبنا، زي ما المسرح والغنى وغيره بنقل صورة شعبنا. مركز الرواد بيعني لي كثير، فهو يعني صار جزء من حياتي، فبيعني لي كثير مركز الرواد.
بعني لي مركز الرواد هو البيت الثاني، وأنا بحافظ على نظافته.
أنا بحب مركز الرواد لأنه بحس بيتي الثاني، وبتعلم من مركز الرواد أشياء كتير.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.